Hello, folks. My name is Manny Straehle. I am going to be your course instructor for Feedback on Feedback, Effectively Delivering and Receiving Feedback. I am founder and president of Assessment Education Research Experts, as well as the founder of the Applied Life Learning Institute, what we call as the All Institute. So my background is in both counseling and educational psychology. I got a doctorate in educational psychology, focusing on measurement and psychometrics, as well as evaluation. And I also, before that, I have all but dissertation, 3 chapters in my dissertation in counseling psychology. And that's where I started pursuing clinical assessments, which I'm going to explain to you why that's relevant in a moment, to the learned feedback, because the Straehle feedback inventory, which measures how someone delivers and receives feedback in the workplace, is pertinent to those 2 degrees. I have a background in IT, also in social therapy. I've worked in various testing organizations, founded various organizations. I've consulted over 100 organizations. I've probably given a number of presentations, but informal presentations like this, I've probably given about 200 of them. So there's something about me. I continue to teach at St. Joe's University, and we'll move on to telling you more about the All Institute. The All Institute, what we want to do is make it engaging, meaningful, practical, applied, problem-based. This is going to give you some things on how to deliver and receive feedback, as well as a definition from our research of what feedback really is, and the different various components of it and how we define that. We have some upcoming courses. We have a Q&A session on tips for navigating the accreditation process, both NANCI and NCCA. We also have something on personality profiles for your certificates. And then in the summer and fall, we're still looking at various dates for these various topics. So the world defines feedback differently. There's different ways of looking at feedback depending upon where you're coming from. The Oxford English Dictionary says information about reactions to a product, person's performance of a task, which is used as a basis for improvement. Performance feedback is the ongoing process between employee and manager where information exchanged concerning the performance expected and performance exhibited. You can see here we're still looking at performance about what they do, the task. And then the U.S. Office of Personnel Management feedback is the primary tool used to provide employees with information and guidance. Employee consists of 2-way communication. Guidance for what? Probably for something on a task to do better than they're doing at the moment. So our way of defining this thing called feedback is that we know that there's a task that someone needs to be doing well on or not doing well on. They could already be doing well on. So what we try to do is we really try to say, well, something's going on that we need to give someone feedback. Normally it's constructive feedback is what we're focusing on right now. And so we need to look at some sort of activity that we need to do to increase their awareness of what they're doing. A lot of times when we're trying to deliver feedback on something where they're not meeting a performance level, and then we need to increase their awareness. A lot of times folks are not aware of that. And we believe that leads to change so that someone could complete a task more effectively. So the problem is when individuals provide ineffective feedback, they don't communicate well to help others build awareness to complete their tasks. And we know this happens, and I'll tell you why that happens in a moment. They learn how to develop awareness to provide effective feedback is what we want to get to. But the reason why, in my opinion, from what we learned when we put together the Straehle feedback inventory, which I'll share with you a demo of that in a moment, and the areas that we try to measure in both delivery and receiving is when people deliver feedback. This is one of the items on the Straehle feedback inventory. We actually asked them how they would rate this on frequency. When I deliver feedback, I use factual examples of the individual's performance to reinforce the feedback. So guess how many people never really didn't do this all the time? It's 64.2% did not do this all the time. So that means 35.8% did this all the time. So they're using facts or examples, only 35.8%. So then what are folks doing is my question. And so a lot of the training that we do is to find ways to help when people deliver feedback, to help them learn how to identify and confirm the facts. We can't make up facts. It really does not help when you're delivering feedback. And when you're receiving it, imagine having someone who doesn't have the facts correct. And that leads me to my story. So I was a research analyst for a large medical organization, nursing organization. And we were conducting a lot of outcomes research on various things to help individuals work with things. So what we found out was there were a lot of trends and things like that. So over the course of maybe 6 months, I learned a job. I was doing reports, putting them together. For some reason, one day my boss thought I did this wrong, and I didn't realize anything about this. I just walked in the door. She said, "We have an appointment with HR, I think at 9:30 in the morning." So I went in there, and she said, "I don't think you're doing your job well." And I asked her, "Well, what does that mean, doing my job well?" And she had said that, "Well, your reports are not accurate." I said, "Well, how do you know my reports are not accurate?" She says, "Well, the data's not right." And I said, "Well, how do you know the data's not right?" She's like, "Well, I looked at it and it's not right." I said, "Well, I'm basing this on the raw data that is provided by the government and our surveys. So how is that not right?" It came down to that. I requested that another person who is equally competent to me, because my boss didn't know anything about a statistical program called SPSS where I did all the analysis. She didn't know anything about that. She knew where my sources of data were, and I was using the right sources. We confirmed that, but we didn't confirm whether I was reporting the right numbers into the reports. So she just accused me of doing something wrong that she didn't have evidence for or facts. So imagine how you feel when you're given information like that by a boss who claims that you're doing something wrong with no evidence. So, the HR person at my request agreed to my terms, and my boss reluctantly agreed to it, from what I recall. And it came out that my work was incredibly rated really well. This had happened to the person who looked at my work. This had happened to her with my boss. So it was an opportunity for her to look at my work and claim that my work was exceptional. She even sent this to upper management, my boss's boss, the C-suite, to say that I was an exceptional employee and doing very good work, and actually improved on some things that she would have never thought of. So that's my story. That's why this is my passion project. I want every person delivering feedback to really lead with the facts and lead with empathy and stop and listen and work with the people you're working with to help them do the best job they can and understand their situation, and use facts more than anything. Use facts when you deliver feedback, because once you don't have facts, then the credibility of your ability to deliver the feedback on the receiving side decreases. So why should you really care besides my personal story? Well, and you don't really have to care about my personal story, but what we know, wherever you are, upper management, lower management, intermediate management, wherever you're working, we know that when feedback, effective feedback is not in place, we have increased errors, increased waste, increased inefficiencies, increased conflicts, increased disengagement, increased miscommunication, increased interpersonal conflict. So imagine how much that would cost. We also know that without effective feedback, you have costs that increase, actually. You have decreased performance, decreased productivity, decreased morale, decreased innovation, decreased retention, decreased employee satisfaction, job satisfaction, and decreased accountability. So if you're looking at as someone who is trying to save money and trying to get things done, you need to really look at what is effective feedback. And we think we have the answers here at Assessment Education Research Expert, AIR Experts, and the Learn Feedback product. If you want to find out more information, we'll get that to you at learnfeedback.com, and which houses the Straehle feedback inventory. So looking even further at this, we know there's research that says it increases productivity. We know that it increases motivation. We know that there's commitment and confidence and engagement in the research. We know that the performance can increase. We know that it can facilitate growth and learning. We know that it can really do a really good job with financial performance. So why wait? Why don't you start assessing where you are as an organization? Where your department at? Where are you at in terms of delivering and receiving feedback? There's research on this. There's articles all over the place. If you go onto the web and just type in feedback in the workplace or among employees, every day there's an article on it, and HBR has something on it here and there almost every other day, actually. So even if you're looking at just one article here, this is based upon one article, but there's a lot of research that shows what happens when you have ineffective feedback: denial, brooding, jealousy, self-sabotage, anger, frustration, discouragement. Do you really want that among your employees? I don't think so. But let's move on here to what the solution really is. This is the Learn Feedback program. It is 4 major steps, and you could do any of these steps in any time you want to. You could look at, we always start with the assess step. Some folks already know where they are, so they just want to train. But we like assessing because it's using our system, really. The assessment is composed of various things. Then we train folks, and then we give the assessment again to see where you're at, to see if the training was effective. And then we coach folks if we need further. Coaching is optional, but we find that when we coach and then we monitor again, we find that to be very effective. We see the results really change. The employees do a lot better. So let's look at how we develop the assessment. We're going to talk a little bit about that so you have a better background. The assessment we call the Straehle Feedback Inventory. It was developed about 2 years ago now, and it was based upon inputs from the literature review. And then we moved on to draft the instrument with subject matter experts. Then we had an subject matter experts review it. Then we piloted it, analyzed it, and then we looked at results, and then we finalized it. This is a scientific method of doing this, and we'll look into each of these in more detail. The literature review, we looked at a lot of different things, scientific literature as well as the common business articles like HBR, Forbes, and Inc. There was a lot more in there than those things. Then we moved on to drafting the inventory. We just wrote things up. Then we used actually a scale that looks very similar to like that for we ended up with 57 items at the end of the day, but we had a total of 31 and 32, 63 items initially. Then we had the SMEs from the HR and change management world look into this, and they reviewed it and so forth. A number of 2 focus groups, I believe it was, and we asked them to draw upon their experiences. Once we had that, we were able to put it into a survey system and then have folks take it. We used Amazon Mechanical Turk. We used it throughout the world. We had, I believe, over 500 people take it. And then we also paired it with the Big Five at the end of it. So now we have a relationship. And Big Five is a personality assessment, a very popular one and very valid one that looks into various segments of your personality. Then we analyzed the data, and we looked at the Straehle feedback inventory as well, the Big Five. We ran frequencies, crosstabs, correlations, and then we ran a factor analysis. The factor analysis resulted in 27 and 30, 27 delivering and 20 and 30 receiving items. And this is some of the results here. You can see here. You can read it on your own. And then delivering feedback, we came up with 4 different areas: opportunistic coaching, empathetic, progressive, and active communication. And we go to the next slide, you can see what this is, opportunistic coaching, and the items really are focused in these areas. You know, this is when we're delivering it, we give someone facts, clear expectations, a balance of both positive and critical feedback. We also say, hey, you know what, we know ways to improve, and we provide for a 2-way dialogue. It's just not me over-lecturing someone or lecturing someone forever, that you have a dialogue. 2 people are talking. Empathetic feedback, which I consistently tell folks, and in the training, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, to lead with empathy. With the person who's delivering the feedback, they think about the person, situation, my situation. Imagine if that person realizes she didn't have facts and she's giving me feedback. You know, she didn't say, hey man, you know, I think you're not running these well enough, and she doesn't bring me right to HR. She could have just said, hey man, I don't think you're running this accurately. Why don't we talk about this a little bit? But they're relating back to my situation, where I am in my world. Maybe I had a really bad day. Maybe I lost a parent. Maybe I lost my dog or something like that. You know, I'll give you an example where I told a coworker that, you know, I lost a dog. Well, I'm putting my dog to sleep in 2 days. This was about last year. And she said, why don't we schedule the call for another time, the call that you have today. And I said, oh, how great that is, because then I could focus on getting this done and things like that. And so it was really nice. You know, I still remember that, you know, them adapting to my world in that situation. But when you're delivering feedback, you always want to consider their work logs, what's going on in their world, adapting to their communication style, and so forth. So the next one is progressive feedback. Again, this is more of like keeping a tab on them and giving them ways to improve on how they feedback and how they deliver or how they're doing with the feedback that you deliver to them, and ways they can still improve. Active communication feedback is very similar to empathy, the empathetic feedback, where you're now, in the sense of similar, you need listening to get to empathy. So you have to really listen, be really attentive, both verbally and non-verbally, body language, tone, make sure you have clear communication. Do they really understand what you're saying? Did you check in whether they understand what you're saying? You know, are you assessing yourself? What's going on with your own self, both emotionally, physically, and things like that? You know, are you really close to their face in terms of proximity when they're telling them they're doing something wrong? And it could be perceived as very confrontive, and there's cultural dynamics to these things as well. So we came up with these names based upon the 27 items we had in delivering feedback. But we're going to move on to the receiving feedback. And our research defines it as this. We have self-regulation, we have reactive, contingent, solicitation, evidential. By the way, one of my areas of my dissertation was on self-regulation, feedback, self-regulation in general. So when we talk about self-regulation, this is receiving. So I've just received feedback from you. What am I going to do? So I'm going to use that feedback to really work on myself, really think about it, and say, hey, you know what, maybe my boss was right. Maybe I did run something wrong in that report. Let me go back and check, And actually I did that. I wanted to check whether I was off on anything. But, that's what I do with that feedback. And then you become aware of your behaviors. What did I do? Am I talking too much about the political climate in Macedonia or something like that in every single meeting, and no one's wanting to talk to me anymore because they get very passionate about it, and things like that. And as well as managing my my emotional reactions to it, so I don't flip out and say, "Oh, you're wrong." And that moves into reactive feedback, where I'm surprised of this, I'm overwhelmed, I'm irritated, I'm very resistant to accepting feedback, and I'm going to ignore the feedback that you just gave me completely. They said, "Oh, you shouldn't be talking to that person that way. That was really demeaning of you." And I just ignore it. Now, I can do whatever I want. Well, I asked you to check in with others, that you were doing this, that, people felt demeaned by it. So if everybody else is thinking that you're demeaning, then there's probably a case that you are demeaning in that sense of it. Contingent feedback, the individual, who's receiving the feedback, I'm going to think, like, if it wasn't coming from, I don't really respect my boss. Maybe I do. Maybe they're just making things up because they don't have enough facts. Maybe someone else is giving me feedback. Somebody who doesn't know what they're doing in 3 different departments away from me, that doesn't have my qualifications, or somebody just came in new and they're not qualified at all. So that's not a credible source. It might be not a trusting person. It might have not been promptly. They gave me feedback 7 months, 8 months ago. So that's the contingent feedback piece. So that's really important. When you're receiving feedback, you're going to perceive the person who's delivering feedback. You need that contingency. Solicitation feedback, you're going to try to find different tools I'm going to go out and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I can ask, some other folks other questions about my feedback. Maybe I could the feedback that I just got. Maybe I am demeaning. Maybe I could reach out to like a therapist friend or a friend of mine and ask them, hey, you know what? Am I demeaning? If one of my close friends says I'm demeaning, or my wife, I might check in with my other close friends. I don't have other wives, so I can't check in with them. But I would check in if one of my close friends said, I would do that, or a coworker or something like that. I do this and that. I would go check in with my wife and ask her. So that's why that having a social group of close, trusting friends, credible friends, is very important. Or whether it's at work or it's elsewhere, I really think that seeking more information about the feedback you received is very important. I think the workforce doesn't do this well enough to seek it in different areas, not only at work, but to see if you're doing those behaviors. So if I'm always talking about, let's say Elmo ran for president, and every single meeting I bring up Elmo, pushing it, and every place I go, then that is an issue. My friends will tell me, my coworkers will tell me, and at work it becomes an issue because I can't get to my work because I'm so focused on Elmo and ruining everyone's else life because they don't want to talk about this at a meeting. They want to talk about how to accomplish task A. So evidential feedback is the next one, and that's where a person can contest their feedback with facts and examples. So if you're receiving feedback, you're good if you say, hey, you know what, hold on a second, like I did with my example. I said, you don't have any facts. I want to get facts to contest it. So that's what made me very effective. I didn't let my boss at the time just come up with facts. So sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, but we hope we're all in a workforce where you can use evidential feedback to contest it. We know that there are repercussions of this, and that's why it's really important. That's why this is a passion project, because there shouldn't be repercussions if you have facts, and because someone's now job or reputation's online, who is a higher person above you or lateral to you or things like that. I have another example of that where someone, they actually fired me. It's the only time I've been fired on a job. But the person who fired me was not my boss or the boss's boss. It was in a whole different department. I was on the technical team, and this was the customer service team. I came in one day, and he said, "You know what, Manny, you're fired." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I don't like how you handle calls." I'm like, "Well, you're not my boss, and this is the first time I'm hearing it. I've been here for I was there for 3 years. The interesting thing is I left. I said, "Thank you. Here's all my stuff. I don't really need to take this." I don't know if it was a tactic. I was very young at the time. That's how they got rid of people that were either too. I think I was getting paid too much. I was a manager at the time too. But the point is that I didn't have any evidence as well. But the person didn't have any evidence. I didn't have any evidence that I was doing bad. I mean, I was there for so long, and I usually solve all the hard problems that were written up. So, how could my customer service be back when I'm dealing with the most difficult of all the clients that none of the techs could deal with over the phone? And this is a lot of phone support. So, technical support. So what happened was that my boss called me back the next day, and he said, "Hey, Manny," or 4 hours later, I don't know what it was, but somewhere it was a very short time frame from when the incident happened. Like, "I'm really sorry what happened, but you are hired back. I want you to know that first. I understand if you don't want to come back. We will hire you back. This was a mistake. I don't know why he did this. It was out of line, and this really never has happened to me. If you need a letter of recommendation at any point, any time, I am there for you. I'm very sorry." So that's how that was handled. But just think how I felt, the person giving that feedback again. I don't know, maybe that's why this is my passion project, because I don't want these things to happen to others. So just sharing you some of some other items. These are the top 3 and top bottom results from the results of when we asked the over 500 people to answer this. What we have here, though, is, I pay attention to individuals' reaction, listen actively. These are the ones that were rated high. They're doing it a lot. And then these are the ones that they're doing low. I schedule time afterwards to follow up feedback that's progressive, that provides source of external support. That's progressive. So progressive is on the lower end of things. If we go to receiving, and it's not too low, just to let you know. I mean, there's still 63%, and this is still like over 50%. So, and they're doing it occasionally too. So you get like almost 70% or more on that one. On the delivering, when you deliver feedback, here it is. Oh, I got this wrong. This is delivering and this is receiving. So just ignore that. I have to adjust that after this call or after this webinar. Sorry. And then I actively listen. Self-regulations. Over here, you could see. Solicitation, these are the highest ones. And let me go back. I use all feedback as opportunity. So I'm sharing the results with you from the Straehle feedback inventory. We call this our global average or our global benchmarks. I ignore feedback. These are the top 3 lowest ones. This is very low. It's reactive feedback, so it's reverse scored. I ignore feedback when it is actual and constructive. So that's pretty good in that sense because they never do it. So you want it to be on the lower end there. So they'll be accepting positive. So that if they're this is a good sign there. So when we did this, remember, we did ask people to not only take the Straehle feedback inventory, but also take a Big Five personality assessment. What we did find is that there is a relationship. Let's go back to that slide. And there's a relationship between these two things. It's a significant relationship. It's a moderate sort of correlation, not anything to get excited about. But what's really neat is people who exhibit agreeableness, we found, and also conscientious. So agreeableness is people who are, you'll see that they're more interested in people, and so they tend to do that, which makes a lot of sense. And conscientiousness are people who are more aware of things, so that makes also more sense. So that's where we get a lot of the on the delivering side and the receiving side. So let's look at a demo here. I'm going to show you a quick demo. This is our website for learnfeedback.com. We tell you the process here. If you want to go further with me, we'll give you a license to take as many as, we'll give you a license or licenses for your organization to do the learn feedback, and then we'll train you up as well if you're interested. You can click on this here. It gives you a punch-out sheet on what's going on with this is the scales, and what's really important here. If you're a technical person, these are good measures to have in terms of reliability. And again, it's based upon those 543 people. But if you really want to do anything, you want to test your feedback skills, go here. You put in your name. You can put test. I think that'll work. Maybe the number doesn't work. So we're going to begin. You could put in this here. This we still have from one of the conferences. We demo these at conferences, so we have the conference demo. So you could begin it, and here's the demo. We have one item for each demo, but a lot of these, the other items are locked. So if you put always, you go to empathetic, save. It gives you a little definition of it. You have to save it. When I deliver feedback, I provide an opportunity to ask questions about the feedback, and it tells you where you are. Again, this is just one item for each area. This is the delivering, which is up here. And then you get this here. And receiving, you go, again, definition. We updated this to say when I receive feedback, I make changes based on the feedback received as soon as possible. Say always. Reactive, let's just say I never am reactive. I'm more likely to make changes based upon the feedback. So promptly. I ask others to help me out. Again, solicitation. You're trying to solicit the information about your feedback. And then evidential. There you go. Then you get, this is what I think is really awesome. You get information about how you're doing. So, I answered in a way that gave me information to make it very effectively because I built this thing. So based on delivering feedback results, you deliver feedback very effectively. Below are your scores across the 4 delivering feedback areas. So always or frequently. So if you didn't do well, it would tell you areas that you might want to improve upon, which I should have done in terms of a demo. But deliver feedback when you consider understanding the situation. You always deliver feedback. Wait, So it tells you why you're doing well in these 4 areas. And receiving, it'll tell you the 5 areas. It gives you an overall average score, then it gives you an average score here. It gives you a little bit feedback on your feedback. And then here, this is a demo, but if you were the employer, you get all your employees' information, and then you get your average, and it would open all this stuff up, and you get more information across this, and it also looks very similar to the receiving. So that's what the demo looks like. So let's move on to the training part. So I'm going to just talk at a very high level of what we do with the training. We do get into a lot of case scenarios, a lot of experiential. We actually use your case studies to help us, to help you get through it a lot better. We do ask for some real situations if you're willing to provide it before the training, so we can work it out on our end and make it real for you. But really the training comes a lot from my clinical and social psychology background, and also my background in theatrical improv, and I am really invested in analytical philosophy, and so we bring these things together to help the individual build awareness. The bigger model, though, is the meta model for everything is when we're teaching people how to deliver, what we're trying to do is when they're delivering, what we need folks to do is help the person you're delivering the feedback develop higher or increase their awareness to change. We want change so that if they're being demeaning to someone, or they're not using facts, or they're doing something else that's annoying or that affects their work in the workplace of others, then what we want to do is to move to change. We want them to change, to do the task better. What we also find out on the receiving side is that we're faced with, when you receive it, you have a process where you're, okay, here it is, I just received the feedback. Am I going to resist it? The facts okay? The facts weren't okay in 2 places of my bosses. One was with my statistical reports, no knowledge, and then the other one was customer service, no knowledge, but I've been there for so long and I've only worked with the very difficult clients that no one wanted to work with. That was my job. I was the highest tier in solving problems for the organization. So, but if it's okay, then I'm going to start accepting, and I'm going to do all those things in the receiving pieces, right? So what we have is, we have this awareness and change going on in the background. And, when we're thinking about it, I always say that what we need to do is we need to lead with empathy, collect your facts, and listen. So this here and this here, as well as you're collecting your facts, are incredibly important so that you could move over the resistance hump. That's the thing. We want you to be as least resistant coming into the person who's receiving the feedback. And if you do these things with opportunistic coaching, empathy, progressive and active communication, we think you could really go far with this. And we talked about what all these things were before, and we go through it again in the training. But again, this is what we try to focus on the entire time. And when we put it all together, the first thing we want you to do is go, okay, that person, there's a situation. Let me collect the facts on that person and confirm the facts. Whether it's good or bad, you still have to have the right facts. Because imagine you give someone, you can have a situation where someone, and I think this has happened to all of us, where we're giving like a lot of praise, but we don't really know for what. I mean, I have bosses that think what I do is, or had bosses, what I did was exceedingly awesome. I have a peer of mine look at it and they go, it's okay. So, your audience of who critics are is really important, because also if you have the wrong critics, then you're never going to grow, and in some cases it can be dangerous. Imagine you're a surgeon and you had a scalping technique, and the scalping technique was wrong, what you were doing, and you were praised for it by the lead surgeon. That means the lead surgeon was doing it wrong, and he's teaching you how to do something wrong as well. So, and it moves into competency there. But let's focus on what's on the screen here. So you want to really lead with collecting and confirming facts, and then you also want to lead with empathy. Think of what that person would be going through, where they're at. Is this a good time to give feedback? Is something going on in their lives where it's just too much and it would really create a lot more problems? Stop, and listen, and use your communication skills. Check in. So is that right? I just gave you feedback on when you talk to that client, you're really abrasive, and this is how you're abrasive. You are very assertive and aggressive when you talk about timelines and deadlines and money, and project costs and things like that. But is there a way you can do that a little less abrasively? Maybe, ask them how their world has been since you last talked to them, instead of saying, here's the project deadline. I mean, we might all do that once in a while, but if that person's doing it all the time, they might not be making sales because they're not asking questions, they're not stopping. But you should be asking questions. You should also be, when you're delivering feedback, check in, clarify, paraphrase, summarize. And we teach you all those active communication skills, the one-on-one active listening skills and communication skills. Also, be aware of your nonverbals and your tone. Make sure that this is for moving people to get better at their job. This is not punitive, but this is better. Sometimes it may be punitive. I mean, this is the third time you're going through this. We've done everything we can, but make it clear that's part of your job. If they're not doing the job and they're not helping and the stakes are high, then it has to be clear that that's what's going on. I'm all about being frank and clear with those sort of things. Then the tools that you have are, remember, opportunistic coaching and progressive feedback, monitoring, giving them things to find that they can use to help them throughout, even yourself, offering yourself, checking in with them. Those sort of things are very important for the tools to make it successful. And we talk you through all of this in future if you take our training. Now, this is what's going on here. Now, on the flip side, you just delivered this feedback. You think it's all great, and it should be all great if you do all those things in that last slide. But you have the dynamics of resistance and acceptance playing out. Those are the dynamics. In the diagonals, I put the dynamics. Diagonals equals dynamics. But this is what you're all you're all considering when you're delivering the feedback, when you're receiving the feedback as a person. And you have to learn how to receive the feedback. We don't learn these things. So how do we do that? So you get the feedback. The process is that you get the feedback, right? And, you might be reacting emotionally or analyzing it. I think many of us do either or both at the same time, depending which one's more dominant with you. Do you lead with emotions or you lead with, analysis there? And there's a lot of personality theories that get into what do you lead with, and some of it moves into intuition, and emotions are wrapped up into that. But I'm not going to get into that here. But what you tend to do is you look at what's going on. Is the data there? Is it accurate what they're saying to me in terms of the feedback? Is the person credible? Is it someone in HR that I never met over the last 3 years giving me this feedback? I don't know. That's contingent and evidential. Can I counter argue with these individuals and say, I agree here that this is right, but how is this right? I don't see any more evidence for this. And so you're analyzing it. And remember, resistance plays into this. So if you don't have those facts and you can't argue the counterfact, then it's going to lead to resistance for that person. And if it does lead to resistance, they are completely right to be reactive, irritated, frustrated, and things like that. If it doesn't, if you're on point with everything you delivered, then that person might not have a reactive feedback going on. And then we have tools that you could use on what you want to use on your own, and then you want to solicit other tools. So your tools are yourself and how to work through these feedback, and then solicitation is how do you do this sort of thing with the help of others and other resources. Not only others, but other resources, including the people who are delivering your feedbacking, and checking out your coworkers to see if that's what happens when you do this, things like that. I'm going to skip out on case studies. Like I said, I'm going to leave that for the training, but the training does get into a number of case studies, including we try to elicit your own case studies from you that you may have. But the next thing we do is once we're done with the training, we want to know how well the training has worked in your organization, and we look at assessing it. Again, we usually suggest that we have a few assessment points when we monitor. So we might monitor immediately after the training, or a few months after the training, or we do both. We do recommend, 2 to 4 weeks after the training, and then maybe 3 months after, and then either 3-month intervals or 6-month intervals, and then annual intervals. We work with you to see what's best. If we need more work and you want to do more one-on-ones or group coaching, we do offer that as well. The training's online that we offer and in person, but we do have coaching where it's very specific to your needs and trying to work with a really talented person, but they just are not meeting tasks or creating a lot of interpersonal issues at the office. And it's just really powerful to have these coaching sessions with these individuals. And again, you could plug and play how you want. Some groups do have coaches, and we work with them using the Straehle feedback inventory. And so this concludes our webinar today on what we learned about feedback on feedback, effectively delivering and receiving feedback. If you have any questions, just feel free to email me. Remember the Learn Feedback website, www.learnfeedback.com. We have a few upcoming free webinars. We have an awesome group of folks coming together to talk about tips for navigating the accreditation process, both NCC and ANSI. These are individuals who've gone through it. It's really neat because it's a Q&A session. I love Q&A sessions because they usually keep your interest level really well focused. So and I like going to those. The other thing that I like to bring into this is we're looking at August date for looking at how can we add value by developing personality profiles for certification holders. It's one of the things that certification world doesn't do well, or do it. It's not that they don't do it well, they don't do it at all. So we're looking at working with a colleague of mine, Dr. Rita Dykstra, on that. So at this point, I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you. We hope to see you in a future webinar. Bye-bye.